All right. Well, if we have folks already tuned in, welcome to this live coaching session between myself and Diana Kander. Diana, before we even start, I just want to thank you for your choice to be open and vulnerable in this public setting and giving other people true access to what it might look like to consider growth and just commit to where your potential maybe lies in certain parts of your life. So I thank you for that. I appreciate you for this opportunity. And before we start, I'd love to just get a read of your energy. How are you feeling today?
Well, I've never done this before, so I don't really know what I volunteered for.
Hmm.
And so I am excited and slightly anxious. That's my energy.
That's a nice balance. I would consider believe it or not, most of my coaching sessions have a similar balance to that, even in the most familiar settings. So before we start, well, as we get started here, I'd love just to learn from you. Coming into this session today, what did you want the focus of our time to really be about?
Well, you do sports coaching as well as personal
Hmm.
coaching, and I feel like my biggest mental hangups right now are in the game of tennis. I feel like I'm playing against myself most of the time,
Hmm.
and so that would be a great place. But I know coaching, and so you might talk about deep-seated childhood issues that are the reason that my tennis stuff is going wrong. So I'm open.
You're open. Specifically, when you look at your tennis game right now, where do you feel that you're maybe dealing with some of these limitations the most?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm very different in my coaching sessions with my coach.
Hmm.
So let's call it practice. And then in a competitive environment, I'm no stranger to being on stage and under pressure. And yet, when it comes to the game of tennis, I feel like I overcorrect and, just grip harder on the racket. My motions become constrained, and so I don't do as well.
Hmm. What are the immediate, when I say, what are the immediate differences that come to mind between those two settings? If you on a stage, again, a public platform, or you on a court, again, in a potentially public platform, what are the main differences that immediately come to mind for you?
Oh, between me on a stage, I get pretty anxious before going on a stage too. It's just
Hmm.
that the nuances, the overcorrection is so slight.
Hmm.
It makes such a difference in tennis.
Hmm. And how aware are you of that as you're playing the game?
I'm pretty aware of overcorrecting. You
Hmm.
know, so if I make a mistake, then I'll make like a way bigger mistake in the opposite direction uh, soon after because I'm like, well, don't hit it out. Then I just hit the net. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And from a problem solving standpoint in that moment, how much mental energy are you putting into those moments where you feel as though a mistake's been made? I need to find a solution. Like, what does that talk me through a little bit of your mental process in those
Yeah, I'm a
moments?
pretty good problem solver, but I've tried to not be the one coaching. I'm just trying to go back to fundamentals and like listen to my coach in my head and the things
Mm,
that he says to me. And
okay.
I'm very curious if there are better things to say to myself. But right now, it really affects me on my serve and my forehand. And I would say I'm just trying to say to myself the things he says to myself of
Mm,
what a good form looks like. So just like, don't worry about what just happened. Just do it like we're doing it for the first time.
mm. Can you give me some more examples of some of this self-talk that's going on?
Yeah, he says to stand up straight, hang my tossing hand up in the air, and don't slow down. So I just say those three things to myself, and sometimes I say them out loud. I don't know that out loud is making a big difference to me, but you know, I'm playing around with everything.
Yeah. So let's go into the practice setting now. You mentioned before that there's definitely a gap there. So when you think about the similar situation in practice, what's the difference when that same thing occurs in a game versus when it occurs in a practice? What is different in those moments?
It's super easy. It's safe. It's more fun,
Mhm.
and there are no consequences to failure. So I just get an unlimited amount of tries.
Yeah. Safe, fun, no consequences. So when you think about the matches now, where do you feel as though you're still lacking that comfortability around it being a safe place, a fun place, and a place with limited consequences.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm having fun. I feel like I'm smiling a lot when I'm playing tennis, and I say to
Mm.
myself constantly, like, I'm playing tennis. That's awesome, you know? And I try to just smile before every serve. Like, I can't believe I get to do this, you know?
Hmm.
At any time of day. What an amazing gift. At the same time, I'm a very competitive person, and I don't like losing points or games or matches. And
Mm.
in tennis, there's also this record that reflects all of it for forevermore and affects your like standing. So every point has significant consequences to your rating, to your team. Like I don't know, they're
Mm.
in my head big consequences.
Yeah, just give me a little bit more information around the competitor. Like describe yourself as a competitor to me and try to be as specific to this domain of being on the tennis court as possible.
Oh, like how competitive I am
Yeah.
about it?
How would you describe the competitor that's playing in any given match?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that question. Do you have some follow-up questions?
Yeah, so when you think about how you carry yourself, when you think about how you go through your processes, like who is that person? What does she look like? If I'm watching from the stands right now, what do I see when you're on the court?
Well, I am hustling a lot and I'm smiling pretty often and I'm very kind to the opponent whenever they get a good point. I always
Mhm.
make a point to say like they did a great job. And when I do a good job, I celebrate uh, probably in an annoying way to the opponent. Like
Yeah,
I just try to celebrate both myself and themselves when they do a great job.
sure, sure. And when you feel your responses in all those situations, how do you feel those responses are serving what's happening next? Are they allowing you to go on to the next point effectively? Do you ever assess that sort of thing?
Oh, um, I I think they're helping me maintain, like, I'm just trying to maintain a positive frame of mind throughout the whole thing. And I read somewhere how if you're in a doubles, like, partnership,
Hmm.
they talk to each other like 80 times during a game. And you don't have that as a singles competitor. So I try to do all 80 by myself.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So clearly that's, and I know you alluded to that at the beginning, but for me to gain a little bit more context around what self-talk looks like, how much you're relying upon it in those moments, I'm really hearing that the emphasis that you're putting on the quality with which you speak to yourself is is great. It's arguably as important a part of your game as anything. Is that accurate for me to sort of assume that?
Yeah. And I think my self talk is pretty neutral or positive. Like,
Hmm.
it's rarely negative.
Yeah. Is that the same self-talk that you have in practice too?
No, I don't have self talk in practice. I'm just doing it.
Interesting. So,
Unless I get a really good point on my coach, and then
sure,
I celebrate. Yes.
sure. So there's this common theme that I'm hearing of this word practice keeps coming up. How do we practice? How do we practice? How do we practice? And interestingly, something that I'm hearing is that we're practicing something in a game that we're not practicing in practice. We have a voice that is in human form in practice, and then that voice in human form is taken away in the game, and now you're relying on your own inner voice. And so I'm curious if you were to start putting in some reps for self-talk in a practice setting, where would you start? If you're coaching Diana right now and you're
Yeah.
saying, okay, I want to work on my self-talk, how I talk to myself, where might I start if I was doing this in a safe, fun, inconsequential environment?
So I read the Inner Game of Tennis, and especially when I started, and everything you read early on, especially, I think has a bigger impact on you. Which said
Hmm.
like, don't try to coach yourself too much on like the specific actions. Just think about the intended action that you want. You want the ball to bounce over here. So like
Hmm.
just think about that as opposed to what you're supposed to be doing, which is,
Okay.
as I say it, the opposite of how I do it.
Okay. So walk me through how that's serving you, I guess. Like, how is that approach helping you currently?
I don't know. I don't have a better approach. So
Okay.
I don't know
So
that it's serving me or not.
So when I asked that question initially around the practice setting, what I would love to learn now is that when you consider the relationship you have with your coach in that setting, what can you learn from the way he's speaking to you in those moments that you yourself could actually be practicing in practice too?
What could I learn? I don't know. I try to say what he says to me in
Okay.
practice in my own head.
Okay. And so when you think about just the results of that, is it always immediate every single time he says it and you see the immediate response, or is it just repetition, repetition, repetition?
Oh, great question. It's the unlimited tries in practice. Like if I just keep saying it to myself, it'll work eventually.
Hmm. How often are you putting yourself in situations in practice where you don't have unlimited tries?
We try to create pressure situations in practice where
Hmm.
I don't have unlimited tries, but it's definitely less than 20% of the time.
Okay. Um, Give me some examples of how you do that currently.
How do I put pressure on?
Hmm.
Um, if I don't do the motions as intended, there are physical consequences. So I have to do like jumping jacks or burpees or whatever. So that just adds a little bit of pressure. And then he and I play points out, and I desperately want to beat my coach.
Hmm. Talk to me about that emotion, desperation in those moments. How does that, how would you articulate what that desperation feels like?
Oh, no, I just, you know, I want it. It makes me try harder.
Hmm. So you feel as though you have another level in those moments to go to?
Yes.
Okay. So how often are you accessing that level in the practice environment?
I feel like I'm at a pretty high level in practice. Like I don't stop to talk. I don't drink water if I don't need it. I'm like, let's go. I'm going to try to do it as much as I can. So I try to get to like a fatigue place, which is also and like part of the process during a match. You get fatigued in a way that you
Mm,
don't. A match will be an hour 45 to 2 hours. A practice session with a coach is 1 hour. So it takes a lot of work to get to even a close level of fatigue
mm.
in with a coach.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting insight. Um, and something I'm hearing again is just further highlighting the differences in these worlds of practice versus the game. And I'm curious when you think about how we can use the next sort of 30 minutes now gaining this context around the situation. What do you want to achieve? What do you want to achieve when you think about this gap that you've now been able to articulate and help me understand better? Where do you see yourself 6 months from now?
Oh, I don't know. I thought you would tell me some magic phrases to say to myself that would make me not nervous and
Right,
not overcorrect. Do you have any of
right.
those?
So, what I love about when we get into this part of the conversation is that that's the first time you've mentioned that you really get nervous. Like you mentioned at the beginning, there's some anxiety around the game, and you get, but to sort of say that something I just heard, there's a potential that within the match itself, you're feeling nerves kick in as the game's going on. Like,
Yeah.
is that accurate?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So at the beginning, we sort of referenced before you go on stage, you feel the anxiety before you go into the match. But now we're talking more about as it's going on, and then that natural intention as well to start over correcting too. So as we sort of go deeper into this now, I would argue that we can maybe spend some time around that specifically, that as it's happening to you in the game and as nerves come to the surface and as that desire to overcorrect starts to really creep in, what are we then saying to ourselves in that very specific moment when we feel the need to overcorrect? So is everything that you've given me as an example already pretty much the same, or does it change in any way when you think about those really specific moments?
Again, I don't know what the best thing to say to myself is because this is like
No, I
I
just want to know what you do say.
yeah,
What do you say?
I just try to do the motions as I'm supposed to. I practice the motion as I'm supposed to do it beforehand. I'm
Mm,
just trying to stick to, how I'm supposed to be moving my body as opposed to any kind of conversation around it.
Mm, okay.
I have also tried telling myself how awesome I am, but I don't know that that works. That's it. I have like a deep void of how to address it.
Sure. Sure. One thing I would love to just use is obviously the world that you're most familiar with is what you're doing in the speaking world. So when you look back on the course of that career, was there ever a moment in that career where you found yourself in similar moments where you're going through the process of delivering the speech and nerves for whatever reason, or you realize that something that was supposed to be the way it was supposed to be doesn't go the way it's supposed to go? How has that come up in your world up to this point, and how have you sort of dealt with that?
I don't usually talk to myself in any way. I just move on, and I know that nobody knows what I'm supposed to say in the
Mm,
audience. So, you just do your best to get out of it.
yeah. And so it's always been that simple.
Oh, no, no. It took 8 years for me not to get physically ill beforehand.
Okay. What did it take to sort of get past that physical illness part?
Just like a lot of reps. Oh,
A lot
and
of reps.
I did actually like a coaching session with people who told me to get into like a persona,
Mm,
a drag version of myself that is the stage performer, and to kind of channel that confidence beforehand. I have
mm,
attempted to do this in tennis. It's just like I would say the margin of error on stage, it's much wider than the margin of error in tennis.
mm.
And so much of what's happening to your body, it's like slight 2% differences make a big difference, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep. Absolutely. So something that is interesting as I listen to this is there's an opportunity here for you to look at, okay, both of these things in your life that have clearly now you've now created this true ownership and real commitment toward. And I think that's what's really interesting and so impressive about the tennis stuff is that you really are as committed by the sounds of it to that as you are your professional life, and you've made it part of that. And so there's an opportunity to at least learn something from this other world that has obviously that you've gone through this process over the years and made it what you've made it now. And so something that I just heard there is there was a willingness to get the reps in, firstly, but secondly, it's that willingness to practice how you show up and how you potentially even see yourself when you're putting yourself in that public setting. But one other thing that needs to be mentioned too is the scope for mistakes. That knowing that in that world you've been able to create this vision, if you will, that hey, I can course correct and the audience doesn't even know. What's keeping you from looking at the world of tennis the same way when you consider the length of time of a game, the amount of shots that you have? Why is there necessarily sort of a roadblock in your mind that's indicating, hey, for whatever reason, I cannot see it the same way that I see the
Oh,
speaking
I
world?
like it's all happening on a subconscious level. So like
Mm-hmm.
I know what I intend to do, but my body just doesn't do those things. So
Mm.
there's a giant mystery gap between why that happens.
Yeah, yeah. So something and this is where, just to sort of ask here, just to grant this permission to me, I'd love to just give you now a little bit of insight, a little bit more direction, as opposed
Yeah,
to,
I would love it.
the coaching side. Um, there's an opportunity here for you to really start asking the question, how do I bring competitiveness into practice more consistently? How do I create stakes in practice that have real costs if, for now, I'm unable to shift my mind in that competitive arena because I'm still seeing it and I will continue to probably see it for a while as this high stakes, high cost environment when I make a mistake. Because there's kind of two ways we can do this. We can either move that arena into practice and or we can try to convince ourselves that, hey, how do I take my practice mindset into the game? And I'm curious, even when I present those two options, which one speaks to you and makes most sense right now?
Well, taking the practice mindset into the game would, I think, be a better long term. It's just like a much more relaxed uh, presence.
Okay. And does
It
that
just feels
speak
like
to
it
the
would be much better.
Yeah, do you feel like that will speak to the competitor that you're showing up as in the competitive arena?
I mean, I'm pretty competitive in practice also. So I don't know that there's ever a time in my life that I'm completely
That you're not
relaxed.
competitive. Okay. So I asked you to explain that competitor to me from the competitive arena earlier. I want you to now try to do the same from a practice standpoint. So you gave me a couple of examples there with your coach, but I just really want to push you to go a little bit deeper here with, okay, you're in practice, you're doing something that is expected to be of a certain standard, and it's not to that standard. How are you talking to yourself? Not trying to solve it, not trying to figure out how to speak positively or be joyful or anything like that. The immediate, authentic, completely candid version of Diana in that moment. What are you saying to yourself?
I'm just trying. I don't think I say anything to myself. I think I just focus on like practicing the motion before we do it again. You know,
Okay. So how do you feel in that moment? Instead of speaking to yourself, how do you feel when you know that something wasn't to a standard?
it's like let's try it again. The, Let me go through the way it's supposed to be done. Let's do it again.
Okay. And again, when you think about now moving into the competitive arena, what is preventing you from looking at a mistake made in that arena the same way you look at it in practice?
Oh, maybe I jump to like I don't have it today. Like my forehand is gone. The serve isn't working. Let me try to go a safer. Maybe I jump too quickly from like let's do it again to let's just do it safe.
Mm, okay, that's interesting. So when you think about that, can you tell me just a little bit more about that that response you just gave me there? Can you give me just a little bit more detail?
Like I'm not gonna try to serve the way that I know I can serve. I'll just like my goal has changed to now just get it in the box instead of go through all the motions. So then you go much slower and you kind of lob things as opposed to full motions, full force. Like one of the things my coach always says when I get nervous, I slow down my movements.
Hmm.
And that's me trying to play it safe, which is also like not the best way to play it, you know?
Okay. So just want to speak back what I'm hearing is like
Yeah.
the when you talked about picking one of those options, bringing the competitive arena into the practice setting or the practice setting into the competitive arena, you feel like the latter is better because it sort of comforts you in that area. You can be a little bit more relaxed, etc. And yet you just mentioned there that when you try to slow down, you literally slow down
Yeah.
in that competitive arena. So I'm going to come back to that question again. Like, is that the best way to serve you in that competitive environment?
No, but I'm not doing a calculated formula in my head. Like
Hmm.
it's just happening.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I need to figure out how to prevent it from happening.
right. And something I really want to get to here is what does optimal Diana look like in the competitive arena? So when I say optimal Diana in the competitive arena, you've described so many versions of Diana the tennis player in the
Yeah.
25 minutes we've had so far, which is
Yeah.
great. Now, with all of that context, describe optimal Diana in the competitive arena.
Loose, unafraid, eh, you know, follow through emotions, just like complete motions.
Mm. I want you to try to refrain from the physical side in terms of how you execute as a player. Remaining loose, remaining unafraid, those are more mindset components. Let's stay in that world. See if you can give me two or three more mindset specific components that you want to see in the optimal Diana.
Confident, fun, just having fun.
Okay. loose, unafraid, confident, fun. Again, is that a version of Diana that is consistently showing up in any other areas? No, wait, in any other areas of her life right now?
Oh, that's me on stage.
Right. So that's you on stage. Okay. So that took 8 years, and we're trying to do something that took eight
That's right.
years in a
That's
much
right.
shorter period of time, right? That's what we're trying to do here.
That's
So we're
it.
trying to we're
Yeah.
trying to do something big, and that's great. I'm all about it. I'm here for that. So when we think about the loose, the unafraid, the confident, fun Diana, if you could talk to, if she could talk to you right now, what would she tell you about the player you are today? What would she say to you?
Oh my gosh. I don't know.
Think about it. Take the time.
That I have all the moves inside of me.
What else would she say?
The more nervous I get, the less I'm playing the kind of tennis that I'm capable of.
What else would she say?
It really doesn't matter if you win or lose.
Anything else you would say?
I don't know. Steve, anything else you would say?
So those three things, I'm curious, have you ever said things like that? Or no, not things. I want to be more specific. Have you said exactly that to yourself before in a competitive arena?
Yes, I have attempted to say those things to myself.
Okay, you've attempted to say it.
But
So
as I told you, I'm trying to say all kinds of things. So I guess
sure,
like the advice I'm looking for is what is the most helpful to say to
right.
yourself?
So this is one of those situations when we talk about reps. What are reps if the rep itself is different every time we
Yeah.
perform it? Yeah, so this is an opportunity here to really hone in and say, if I were to commit to a way of speaking to myself for the foreseeable future, how long, and I'm asking you now the question, how long would you need to talk to yourself this way for you to feel as though by the end of that length of time, you've given it enough time to judge whether or not, hey, this is either effective or ineffective?
Oh, I mean, just like one game. Because in a game, I go through, oh, I mean, let's call it two matches, you know?
Hmm.
That would be enough time.
Okay. How about a successful tournament?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
many matches? How many matches is that?
2 to 4.
2 to 4? Okay, cool. So when's the next tournament? I'm curious.
I don't have, there's none available right now. But
None
there
available.
are, matches starting in January.
Okay. When you think about how you've maybe turned a corner previously, when you look back at that 8 year of growth in speaking, for instance, how were you able to keep yourself disciplined to try what you did a certain way for so long to get to where you eventually got to? Like, what allowed you to remain disciplined to that way of doing it?
It was how much I loved doing it.
Mm,
And I don't know that I was disciplined. I literally tried every possible thing to help with my nerves, you know?
mm,
Just like this,
yeah.
I was very open to what I could try.
Was there one or two things that kind of stuck around when you think about all the different ways you did it?
Creating a stage persona, like an
Mm,
identity. And I think the other one is just like reps.
yep,
A lot of reps.
yep. You have all the moves inside of you. The more nervous you get, the less capable you become. And it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. Are you convinced by that?
Yes, I believe all that.
Okay. What's going to keep you believing it moving forwards? What's going to allow you to keep believing that?
I don't understand the question.
What I mean by that is what's going to keep you from not changing whether or not that is a way to speak to yourself.
Oh, well, is that what I should be saying to myself? As opposed to like these are the movements, execute them this way, you know?
Well, something that's really coming through in this time is when you think about the way you respond to a physical movement, there's a problem and solution approach that you're taking to just about any problem that comes up during the game right now. And that's an enormous amount of problem solving in the space of however long you're playing a game.
Yeah.
And so the question then becomes, how effective is that to someone trying to perform at the best of their abilities when all they're doing in their mind is trying to consistently solve problems?
I mean,
Because
it sounds like you're saying it's not a very good use of my. In addition to me, I'm trying to. It's like playing chess. Figure
mhm,
out who's doing what to whom. What are they great at? What are they not great? There's a lot of thinking that I'm doing while
mhm,
playing, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. And so where's the place to work on problems?
Yeah.
Where's the place to do that? To work on your problems when you come to your tennis game?
Where, like, when is the best time to do that?
When's the best time to do that?
In the changeovers. Like, when is the best time? I don't know. Is there a better time?
Well, in terms of the holistic approach to getting better, I would say practice
Yeah, yeah.
when you're in practice. So then it becomes, because part of this work now can be, okay, how much can I start to trust my practice process so that I can focus on speaking to myself this way when I'm in a competitive environment? So when you think about your process in practice, the way you're going about doing what you're doing, this is not a way of looking at your coach, and that's not what this is about. This is
Yeah.
about you looking at the practice process and saying, okay, how can I build so much trust in that part of this so that when I get into the competitive arena, no matter what problem comes through, this is the consistent solution. No matter the problem, this is the solution that I provide to it, because I know when it gets into the weeds of the problem itself, one, it might not serve me in a competitive arena, but two, I have this really safe, fun place that I can go to in practice to to work on it there. Because chances are you have somebody in the stands, I assume, who's making a note of, hey, that forearm, that forehand wasn't the way it was supposed to be. That backhand wasn't the way it was supposed to be. That serve wasn't the way it's supposed to be. Is that true?
Sometimes I record it
Yeah,
too.
yeah. There you go. So you have, I mean, that's another insight that is so helpful to this. You have game film that can allow you to pick holes as much as you want once you're done. When you think about being present in the moment, how might these three things, these three pieces of insight help you be present in a game?
Are those the best way for me to be present?
I'm asking if it would help you to be present.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're pretty good, but maybe you have some better things to keep me present.
But here's the thing is like what's worked for an Olympic champion, an elite level player over here, sadly, that's just not how this works. It's all specific to the individual. That's why I wanted you to describe optimal Diana
Yeah.
and have her speak to modern day Diana and say, okay, this is what you need to hear from me. Because at some point you're going to arrive here, you're going to get to this level. But in order for you to do that, here's three really straightforward, simple things that you got to understand right now. Because if you can't grasp this, it's going to be really hard to make those potential steps that you can make to getting to that optimal standard.
Are
So
there,
when it, go
yes,
ahead.
sorry. No,
No,
no.
no, no, go ahead.
Oh, but are there any other, I don't know, optimal Diana is still not an optimal athlete. So are there any other, I hear what you're saying, but are there any other ideas for how to stay present and not problem solve?
Yes, and again, the one thing I'm always trying to do is make it as specific to you as possible. And in
Sure.
this kind of situation, I know a big part of why you wanted to meet with me is I can give you some of my sort of insights from experience working with elite
Yeah.
athletes. And so part of where I'm kind of going with the trust in practice is that there's an insight that I want to provide to you that I've been providing athletes for years, is that there's a reason why we call it practice and not training. I train. I train to be in shape. I don't practice because I'm not expected to perform. You're practicing. Part of practicing means there's going to be a performance that comes out of it. And you've explained your process when it comes to speaking to the level that you've spoken at, and you continue to. And part of that was respecting the fact that there was a performance that was coming out of that practice. Tennis is no different. Sport is no different. And the reason we call it practice is it allows you to look at it and say, okay, if I'm practicing, it means at some point I got to perform. But if we're questioning how we're performing in the moment, that's a way to come back to the practice and say, what am I not doing in that time to give myself the trust to be present when I perform? So the beauty of these three insights is that they can actually anchor you into presence in the performance
Mm-hmm.
and shift the spotlight back onto the practice and say, what am I doing or could I be doing in this setting to build the kind of trust where no matter the result over here in the performance, I know I'm going to come back to the practice better for that performance and better positioned to build upon how I will perform next time.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
Cool.
make sense?
Yes. And
Yeah.
and are there any other helpful self-talk principles that you think would help?
Yeah, I think these three, believe it or not, the hardest thing that you're going to have with this is not being distracted by what's happening right in front of you. Because you are going, because again, this is the one thing in my world all the time that I emphasize. Like, just because we've had this conversation does not mean that Diana consistently now says these three things to
Sure.
herself forever and ever and ever. You're still whatever years of habits that have created who you are, how you think, how you do, etc. So there's still lots of work ahead. However, when it comes to these three things, my challenge to you would be, how can you start to practice these three things? What do you have to do within your world to make these three things such a part of it that you literally can't avoid them?
Mm-hmm.
It's all you hear, it's all you see. And it becomes a part of your wiring in a way where when you're on the court, the only way that you're going to intuitively respond in that moment is with these three insights. And so for me, I think that's when I look at all the athletes I've worked with over the years, the sooner that they can focus on that practice setting and build that trust there, the sooner they can then start to identify what are my two or three insights I need to be providing myself. How much do I therefore believe in them? And how disciplined can I become about only saying those to myself instead of falling into the trap of course correction, redirection, etc., etc.
Cool.
So I understand that you want this, like, this is the saying,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is the
yeah.
this is the line. Say this line, and you're the greatest tennis player ever. But part of why I love this exercise of you sort of looking at yourself as an optimal Diana back on where you are today is that we still don't know who she is.
Yeah.
We don't know what she looks like as a tennis player. We're still working towards her. However, me asking you that question, even though you can't see her right now and we can't watch her play tennis, she's still capable of talking to the in the moment Diana in a way where it's like, girl, this is how you're kind of getting in your own way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I love those insights because I think that's you being truly authentic on behalf of your potential. You're
Mm-hmm.
considering your potential and you're prioritizing it in how you speak to it. How does this sound?
It sounds great. It sounds different than what I've been trying. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to try it for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Let me ask you this,
Yeah.
because I like to get a better insight of just what optimal Diana looks like to you also in this moment. So we're kind of flipping the roles. How great do you want to be at this?
It's a great question. Um, I don't know. I want to find out.
I got to challenge you to give me a better answer than that.
No, I just want to keep getting better. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I
Just
don't
like
know.
there's no like give me dream. What's the dream? What's the dream?
It's a great question. I just feel like I'm very open. I just want to be able to play In a trusting capacity of my body. I want to intend to do something and then do that thing. No matter how fatigued I am, um, or how much pressure there is.
Hmm.
That's it. That's the dream.
And if you're able to trust yourself in how you perform the movements that you create, what results what results do you expect from that performance?
Oh, do you mean like winning?
Yeah,
Winning.
yeah, that's definitely what I mean.
I honestly like. I'm very competitive, but the winning part is not that important to me. I like
Okay.
competing. I like doing
Hmm.
my best. I don't like losing. But the winning is like I don't dream of trophies.
Hmm.
You know? Like it's awesome when it happens, but that's not my motivation. I want to be better.
I want to be better. Okay. Whether we have time for this right now, I'm not sure, but I would love for you to dedicate some time to defining what you mean by better.
Yeah.
It's one of those words that we can kind of use it in two different ways. One, we can own it, and two, we can use it as a wonderful way to avoid the conversation. Yeah. So now I'm not suggesting which one it is. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that better can mean anything,
Sure.
you know? And so I encourage you. I mean, even now we've got a couple more minutes. Like this time next year, what's better? Define better.
Yeah, sure. I want to continuously improve. So I want
Hmm.
to increase like 20 miles per hour to my forehand, backhand, serve. I want to increase my consistency of one serves. I want to add a consistent second serve. I want to have, well, I said pace on my backhand. Um, and I want to be better at the net. There you go. That's all of it. I don't know what else there is, but I want to increase
Right.
my percentages of consistency. And um, my goal for 1 year from today, I currently play until the other person makes a mistake. And my goal a year from now would be finishing points on my own.
Interesting. And there we have direction when it
Okay.
comes to better. That little insight right there. So when you talk about how to talk to yourself,
Yeah.
if you can find one word, if you can find one word that captures where you're trying to go and how you're trying to get better, I think you may have just said it in finish. Something about that word, the way you said that sentence, finishing points on my own. There was an ownership to that. There was an intent to that. There was a clarity to that. It was like, I know if I do that, that version of Diana that's playing to wait for my opponent to make a mistake is no longer.
Yeah.
And now I've become this version of Diana. That's the next step in my evolution. And so that's the beauty of this is that you now have, okay, how will I look at better this time next year? All of those things, all those details, all those specifics that you're probably working on with your coach every single time you practice. Absolutely. All of those things can be measured. But what a really emotionally anchored commitment that could be of just like, I want to finish points. I want to finish. And I don't, and only you need to know what that means.
Yeah.
And that's
And you're
powerful.
making me all emotional, Steve.
That's
That's your
that's
job.
the Yeah, I mean, it is my job. A little bit. I get called a business therapist way too more than I should. But um, fact of the matter is, like, that's really crucial, for you to be able to anchor yourself in that word because you could just hear it in your tone. And again, I'm now getting it in your emotional response too, which is even just further supports the point is that's
So
interesting.
do I say anything about that to me in the game? You know?
I believe, again, I'm very conscious of time, um, but I believe that there is now work for you to do around because you very quickly went into, I thought we might not have time, but you very quickly like knocked out like what does getting better look like in 12 months. It's almost like you already had that prepared. That's great. Um, from a finishing standpoint, that emotion that you now feel,
Yeah.
if you've got 5 minutes after we hop off this call, I would just write down what would it mean to Diana to be able to finish more consistently. and just empty out, empty out. Don't let it make sense. Just write it out, write it out. And I think in that, I'd like to believe there's going to be some insights that correlate to those three things that you've already said about yourself. But in addition to that, you can almost now have this term finish and have these three things that really support and reinforce what it means to finish. And then as the matches, go by and the years go by, you have this anchored word where these three things can either consistently remain or they can slowly evolve, but it's always anchored in that really powerful emotional word that is finish.
Okay, last question. But like,
Yes.
how do I bring that word in? Because it's very different from you. That's like an offensive word, you know?
Interesting.
As opposed to the three things that are like, it's cool, you know, we're all here to have a great time and you're good. So how do I use that as I'm trying to talk to myself?
Well, we both know framing is very powerful when you think about like just those three insights. And the first two, I would actually believe can be framed in a more offensive way. Like you have all the moves inside of you. That sounds pretty intentional.
Yeah.
The more nervous I get, the less capable I am. Again, that's like, hey, so don't get nervous. You know, focus. When they feel those nerves coming in, finish. Focus. Like push the nerves down by speaking into that finish language. Um, it doesn't matter if you win or lose. That's where you may have a little bit of assessment to do around that one. You know, we've now got these three things that made a lot of sense. You say finish, you have that emotional response. We sit and we look at it now and we go, okay, does it matter if you win or lose? Is there a tiny bit more truth in that we're maybe not allowing ourselves to access? And there could be some work to do around that. Um, and again, I don't want to be leading or assumptive, but at the same time, that is some work for you to now do around that term finish, because when you empty out what it means to you to finish, I'd be curious is how much do you see each one of these three things, and if one of them needs to be removed or reworded in any way, shape, or form. That's the beauty of this, is you can kind of play around with that before you fully commit to implementing it within, you know, how you do what you do consistently.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to, just because this is a live event, and
Yeah.
again, no idea how many people are watching. You
Yeah.
know, there was about 50 people that signed up. Who knows? But I'd love just to spend 2 or 3 minutes now. Just where's your mind at? How was this experience for you?
Well, the experience was awesome. I am trying to take like the high level idea into a practical, like, am I going to be telling myself to focus and finish? You know, like from
Mm-hmm.
this conversation to tactical, how do I implement and what am I experimenting with in the next time I play?
That's awesome. That's awesome. And how equipped do you now feel to go on and achieve what you want to achieve, at least in the coming months?
Well, I feel very excited to try
That's
the
good.
new way of talking to myself. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see how it would be effective.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm proud of you. I'm excited for you. I appreciate just your willingness to, you know, again, that's the hard thing about this environment, because people don't know. I don't coach you. You're not a client. You
Yep.
know, this is a first time setting for both of us in this domain. And so just to kind of break through that maybe lack of rapport that we have, and you being so comfortable and so willing, just to let me in and ask a couple of questions that maybe probed a little deeper than anyone watching. Maybe they're like, hey, I don't think I would want him asking me that question in front of people. I appreciate you letting me do that. But at the same time, just best of luck with what it is you're doing and what it is you're doing moving forwards. And any last words or any feedback for me?
No, I just super appreciate you taking the time and helping me get my head right. It is the biggest challenge in a physical sport.
That's right. That's right. Well, at least you're willing to admit it and work on it. That's what matters. That's what matters. So
Thank you.
appreciate you, Diana. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Too.